Welcome back to Karma Chronicles. If you believe that getting what you deserve is the ultimate law of the universe, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming. He was the most celebrated executive in our company's history, but as I watched him accept an award for outstanding leadership, I knew the truth. I knew his name was a fake, his degree was a forgery, and the watch on his wrist was bought with money he'd stolen from a dead man's legacy. He thought he was untouchable. He didn't know I had the receipts. The applause in that grand ballroom was deafening, a wave of admiration for a man who didn't even exist. My boss, Marcus Thorne, stood on stage, bathed in the spotlight, a picture of corporate perfection. He held the crystal trophy, a testament to his supposed integrity, and smiled a smile so practiced, so brilliantly false, it made my stomach turn. I stood in the back, a ghost at the feast, clutching a single, folded piece of paper in my pocket. It wasn't much, just a printout of an expense report, but it was the first thread. The thread I pulled until his entire, glittering world unraveled. He talked about transparency, ethical leadership, and the values that made our company a beacon in the industry. All I could think about was the hotel charge. A 5-star suite in Zurich, a city he'd supposedly never visited. On a weekend, he was allegedly at a leadership retreat in rural Virginia. That was the beginning. That was the tiny crack in the facade that led me down a rabbit hole so deep and dark, I almost wish I'd never found it. He was a liar, a thief. A phantom living in the shell of another man's life. And as the crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation, I didn't clap. I just looked up, nodded once, and knew. His time was up. Karma was coming, and I was going to deliver it myself. To really get the fall, you have to understand the height he fell from. Marcus Thorne wasn't just a boss. He was a phenomenon. He'd joined Sterling Corporation about 8 years ago, a supposed wunderkind from a rival firm with a dazzling resume and a charisma that could charm a snake right out of its skin. He talked a big game, but he always seemed to back it up. Under his leadership, our division's profits tripled. He was the golden boy, the man with the Midas touch. The board loved him. The CEO treated him like a son, and the junior employees looked at him like he was a rock star. He had this way of remembering everyone's name, asking about your kid's soccer game, making you feel seen, even while he was probably calculating how to downsize your department. He wore impeccably tailored suits, a Patek Philippe he claimed was a family heirloom, and told these stories of his humble upbringing that were just a little too perfect, a little too cinematic. He built this whole image of a guy who earned his success through sheer grit, a story the company loved to promote. He was the face of Sterling Corp. Integrity, innovation, success. And me, I'm Alex. I was the polar opposite. For 12 years, I was the senior operations manager for his division. I wasn't flashy or charismatic. I was the quiet engine in the machine room, the one making sure the shiny parts on deck actually worked. I'd been with the company since it was a fraction of its size. I built the operational frameworks he now takes credit for. I designed the logistics systems he presented as his own innovations. I was competent, dedicated, and completely invisible, and mostly I was fine with that. I wasn't looking for the spotlight. I believed in the work. Marcus treated me with a kind of patronizing kindness. He'd call me his rock, his secret weapon in meetings, but always with a pat on the shoulder that felt like he was talking to a golden retriever. He knew I was good, which is exactly why he kept me around. I cleaned up his messes. I turned his half-baked ideas into profitable realities. He'd sketch some wild concept on a whiteboard, all arrows and buzzwords, then leave it to me to spend 3 months untangling the logistical nightmare. Then, at the quarterly review, he'd present my flawless execution as his strategic victory. For years, I just swallowed my pride. I told myself it was for the good of the company. But you start to notice patterns. And the patterns around Marcus were weird. Little things at first. He'd get facts about his own past wrong. One day, he'd mention growing up poor in Chicago. The next, he'd reference a privileged childhood in Connecticut. He claimed to have an MBA from Stanford, but couldn't talk about Northern California for 30 seconds without making a basic mistake. I filed it all away, figuring he was just a salesman who liked to embellish. It wasn't my job to question him, but my fatal flaw, or maybe my greatest strength, has always been my attention to detail. I'm the kind of person who reconciles spreadsheets for fun. I notice when a single digit is out of plaque. And Marcus, for all his brilliance, was getting sloppy. The lies were starting to fray. It all started with that one expense report that landed on my desk on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. It was a standard expense reconciliation, something I did 100 times a year. Marcus had submitted his expenses for the month, a sea of lavish dinners and first-class flights, all under the umbrella of client development. But one charge stood out. A 3-night stay at the Dolder Grand in Zurich, over $4,000. I frowned. Zurich? I checked his calendar. That weekend he was scheduled for, and had reported attending, a leadership retreat in a rustic lodge in Virginia. My first thought was a simple mistake. I sent a polite email. "Hi, Marcus, flagging a potential discrepancy on your latest expense report. There's a charge for a hotel in Zurich for the weekend of the 15th, but our records show you were at the retreat in Virginia. Can you clarify? Just want to make sure it's coded correctly. Thanks, Alex." His reply came back in minutes, unusually fast. "Good catch, Alex. Must be an accounting mix-up. That was a personal trip weeks ago. I've already spoken to them. Don't worry about it." But I did worry, because it made no sense. The charge date was for that exact weekend, and I hadn't even sent the report to accounting yet. It was still on my desk. He was lying. It was a clumsy, obvious lie. For the first time, it wasn't just a weird story. It was a clear, documented falsehood. He was hiding something. That night, I couldn't sleep. Why lie about something so small? What was in Zurich? I went back to the office, letting myself in with my key when the building was dead silent. I started digging, quietly, methodically, using the high-level administrative access I'd had for years, access Marcus had clearly forgotten about. I started cross-referencing his expense reports from the past 2 years, documenting everything on an encrypted drive. It was slow work. I found more. A rental car in Miami during a week he was supposedly in New York, lavish dinners in Paris on dates that coincided with a family emergency. Flowers, jewelry, expensive gifts sent to an address in a city he had no business in, all billed to a vague, consulting line item. He was living an entire second life on the company's dime. The investigation took over my nights and weekends. The financial trail was damning, but it felt incomplete. It showed greed, but it didn't explain the lies about his past. The next step was riskier, verifying his credentials. Our company had surely done a background check, but something was wrong. I started with his degree, an MBA from Stanford, according to his official bio. I used a third-party academic verification service. I typed in his name, Marcus Thorne, and his graduation year. The result came back in under an hour. No record found. My blood ran cold. He never went to Stanford, so who was he? A broader search for Marcus Thorne came up empty. It was like he didn't exist a decade ago. Then a horrible thought hit me. I went back to the alumni database, but this time I didn't search for a name. I searched for graduates from that year and cross-referenced them with old employee records. It took hours. And then I found it. A name I hadn't thought about in years. Daniel Sterling. Daniel had been a brilliant, quiet analyst at our company a decade ago. A genuine Stanford MBA. Smart, kind, destined for great things. But he died in a hiking accident 9 years ago. I remembered the memorial. He was the grandson of the company's founder. His full name was Daniel Sterling Thorne. My hands were shaking. I pulled Daniel's old employee file from the archives. The photo showed a young man with a bright, hopeful smile. I pulled up Marcus Thorne's headshot. He was older, more polished, but the facial structure, it was an echo. And then I saw it. The Thorne is from Daniel's middle name. The Sterling from the company that his grandfather built. Marcus hadn't just stolen a name. He'd co-opted an entire life, using details from a dead man to give his new persona legitimacy. This wasn't just fraud. This was a desecration. Using Daniel's real details, I found a hidden world online. Social media profiles under variations of Daniel's name, with photos of Marcus on lavish vacations. Accounts with luxury retailers, property records for a condo in Zurich. He had built a fortress of lies, funded by the company Daniel's grandfather had built. The scope of it was breathtaking. It was an audacious, intricate web, and I had found every last thread. The pieces were all there, but the plan was just starting to form. And if you're enjoying seeing this web of lies get untangled, do me a favor and hit the like button. It tells YouTube you want more stories like this from Karma Chronicles. All right, back to the silent plan. For a full week, I just sat on this mountain of evidence. My first instinct was to go to HR, but I knew how that would end. HR protects the company, not the employee. Marcus was a rainmaker. They'd bury my claims, discredit me, and quietly push me out. No, a quiet report wouldn't work. This couldn't be a whisper. It had to be a thunderclap. This was about justice for Daniel. My plan had to be cold, calculated, and professional. A chess move, not a bar fight. I had to use the system against itself. The annual shareholder meeting was in 6 weeks. The entire board, major investors, the financial press, everyone would be there. And Marcus was scheduled to give the keynote address. The topic: a new era of transparency and trust. It was perfect. Next, the hardest part. I had to find Daniel's family. I dreaded it. I was about to reopen a wound that had taken them years to close. Using old records, I found his parents, a retired couple in Vermont. For 3 days, I just stared at their phone number. Finally, I dialed. I spoke to his mother, carefully, gently. I told her I was a former colleague of Daniel's and that I'd come across something disturbing. At first, she was guarded. But as I laid out the facts, the stolen credentials, the fabricated identity, the fraud, her caution turned to a quiet, trembling fury. They'd always had a feeling something was amiss about their son's death. My story gave a name to a pain they'd been living with for 9 years. They agreed to come to the shareholder meeting. I booked their flights myself. With that in place, I compiled the evidence into a single, devastating dossier. Every fraudulent report, every fake credential, all of it. I also logged every compliance warning Marcus had ignored over the years. I made 2 copies on encrypted USB drives. One for me. The other I sent via secure courier to a contact at the SEC, with instructions to open it only if they received a coded email from a new, anonymous account. That was my insurance policy. The final piece was the presentation itself. The night before the meeting, I let myself into the office. I opened Marcus's slick keynote presentation. I didn't change a word. I just added 1 slide to the very end. A single slide. It was a picture of Daniel Sterling's tombstone. Above it, I typed 1 line. My name was Daniel Sterling Thorne. Who is Marcus Thorne? I saved it, replacing the original. Then I gave a second USB to a junior AV tech I knew was trustworthy, a kid Marcus had once humiliated in a public meeting. It contained a short video, a side-by-side of Daniel's smiling photo and Marcus's corporate headshot. I told him it was a backup video, and to have it ready to play on my signal, an anonymous text from a burner phone. The trap was set. The day of the meeting, the ballroom was buzzing with corporate self-importance. The board looked pleased, and the CEO was beaming. I stood near the back by the AV booth, my heart a steady, cold drum. I felt strangely calm. I was just an auditor here to correct a catastrophic error. I met Daniel's parents at a service entrance and escorted them to reserved seats in the front row. They sat silently, their hands clasped, their faces etched with a grief that had sharpened into resolve. Then it was Marcus's time. He walked on stage to thunderous applause, looking magnificent. "We stand at a precipice of a new era," he began, his voice resonant and sure. "An era defined not just by profit, but by one single guiding principle, trust. The bedrock of that trust is transparency." I almost laughed out loud. For 20 minutes, he gave a master class in doublespeak, using words like authenticity and integrity without a hint of irony. He was taking his final bow on a life he had stolen. As he approached his closing remarks, my hand went to the burner phone. "So I ask you to join me," he said, arms outstretched, "in building a future built on a foundation of absolute, unwavering transparency." That was my cue. As he paused for the applause, I sent the text. "Now." The tech nodded. The big screen behind Marcus flickered to black. A murmur of confusion went through the room. And then the new slide appeared. The gray image of Daniel Sterling's tombstone is cold and undeniable. Above it, the question hung in the silent air. "My name was Daniel Sterling Thorne. Who is Marcus Thorne?" A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. A sound I will never forget. Marcus froze. The blood drained from his face. His smile dissolved into a mask of pure horror. At that exact moment, the main doors swung open. Daniel's parents stood up and began walking slowly toward the stage. The room erupted in frantic whispers. People were pulling out their phones. The board members were on their feet. I had made one last anonymous tip that morning to our head of security, suggesting he run a deep background check on Marcus Thorne, cross-referencing him with a deceased employee named Daniel Sterling Thorne. As Daniel's parents walked, security was already moving, not toward them, but toward Marcus. The CFO stormed in FR. Ohm a side door, his face white with rage, holding printouts from my dossier. The web had snapped shut from all sides. Marcus looked from the tombstone to the grieving parents, to the CFO, to the security guards now flanking him. The charismatic leader was gone, replaced by a cornered, terrified man. He started to stammer, This is a mistake, a misunderstanding." No one was listening. The CEO pointed a trembling finger and uttered a single, choked word. "Out." Security took his arms. His downfall was absolute. He was fired before he even left the stage. As they escorted him out, past the scrambling reporters and the stunned shareholders, past the parents of the man he'd impersonated, I watched from the back. The karma wasn't just instant. It was poetic. The aftermath was a corporate tidal wave. The story exploded. The SEC investigation, triggered by my disclosure, was swift and brutal. Sterling Corp was hit with massive fines, but my methodical approach had saved the company from complete collapse. Marcus, or whatever his real name was, I never found out, faced multiple federal charges. His assets were frozen. The last I heard, he was facing a lengthy prison sentence, a ghost stripped of his borrowed skin. The day after, I walked into the CEO's office and placed my resignation on his desk. He looked tired. "You don't have to do this, Alex," he said. "We owe you. There's a place for you here, any place you want." I shook my head. "With all due respect, sir, I think my work here is done." I hadn't done this for a promotion. I did it because it was right. To stay would feel like capitalizing on a tragedy. My final act was handing over one last USB drive with the full, time-stamped logs of my investigation. I walked out of that building and didn't look back. I didn't need their money or their title. I had my integrity and, for the first time in years, a profound sense of peace. Sometimes, the most powerful person in the room isn't the one on stage. It's the quiet one in the back, the one who's been paying attention. He thought I was just part of the furniture. He never realized that from where I was sitting, I could see everything. And I had the receipts. And that's the story of how a quiet man in the back of the room brought a corporate god to his knees. If you believe karma always finds its mark, hit that like button and subscribe to Karma Chronicles for more stories where the arrogant get what they deserve.